August 1943, the SG radar aboard USS Dunlap detected 4 Japanese destroyers at 29,500 yards in complete darkness. Commander Frederick Musburger, commanding Task Group 31.2 from Dunlap's bridge, had been waiting for this moment. The Japanese had no idea American ships were tracking them. They had no radar capable of detecting the 6 American destroyers positioned in Vela Gulf. In 17 minutes, 3 Japanese destroyers would be sinking, and the Imperial Japanese Navy would face a defeat they could not explain. The Japanese force consisted of 4 destroyers carrying 900 soldiers to reinforce VA on Kolombanga Island. Captain Kaju Sugiura commanded the group from destroyer Hagikaze. His force included Erasure and Kawakaze, both loaded with troops, plus Shiger carrying no soldiers but providing escort. Sugiura had used the same route through Vela Gulf 3 times before without incident. Commander Tikihara, commanding Shiger, had objected during the planning meeting. He argued that repeating the same approach route was inviting disaster. Sugiura overruled him. The Tokyo Express supply runs had been successful for months. Japanese commanders believed their superior night fighting ability would protect them. Musa's force consisted of 6 destroyers in 2 divisions. Dunlap, Craven, and Mori formed Division A1, all carrying full torpedo batteries. Lang, Sterrett, and Stack formed Division A2 with reduced torpedo capacity but enhanced anti-aircraft guns. All 6 ships carried SG surface search radar. For the first time in the Pacific Campaign, American destroyers would operate independently without cruiser support. The decision represented a fundamental shift in naval doctrine. American forces had lost nearly every night surface engagement in the Solomons Campaign from August 1942 through July 1943. The worst defeat came at the Battle of Savo Island on August 9, 1942. For Allied cruisers were sunk in 37 minutes. USS Itoria lost 219 men. USS Quincy lost 370. USS Vinson lost 322. HMAS Canberra added 84 more Allied dead. The Japanese force achieved complete surprise. American ships equipped with SC air search radar had detected contacts, but the radar returns were confused by the surrounding islands. Guadalcanal, Savo Island, Florida Island created a maze of radar echoes. SC radar operated at 1.5 m wavelength. It could detect large ships at 20,000 yards, but resolution was poor. Around islands, operators could not distinguish between ships and land masses. The radar scope showed everything as undifferentiated blips. Visual confirmation was required before opening fire. By the time American lookouts saw the Japanese ships, torpedoes were already under the water. The pattern repeated through multiple engagements. Battle of Cape Esperance in October 1942. First Naval Battle of Guadalcanal in November 1942. Battle of Tassaparanga in November 1942. Battle of Kolombangara in July 1943. American ships had radar, but radar alone did not win battles. The technology existed. The doctrine to use it effectively did not. The SG radar changed everything. Developed in 1941 by the Radiation Laboratory at MIT using British cavity magnetron technology, the SG operated at 10 centimeters wavelength microwave frequency. The shorter wavelength provided dramatically better resolution than SC radar. The SG could distinguish between a ship and an island. It displayed contacts on a plan position indicator, a circular scope showing range and bearing simultaneously. Operators could track multiple targets while the ship maneuvered. The first operational SG radar was installed aboard USS Augusta in April 1942. Production ramped up slowly. By August 1943, most American destroyers in the South Pacific had received SG installations, but having radar and using it effectively were different problems. American naval doctrine in early 1943 still emphasized cruiser-led task forces for night engagements. Destroyers operated as escorts. Cruisers provided firepower. Visual targeting determined when to open fire. Radar provided warning, but the final decision to engage required seeing the enemy. Japanese forces exploited this hesitation repeatedly. Their lookouts were trained for night operations. They could spot ships at ranges where American lookouts saw nothing. Japanese torpedoes had twice the range of American weapons. The Type 93 Long Lance could reach 40,000 yards. American Mark 15 torpedoes managed 15,000 yards. Japanese forces could fire first, withdraw before American ships responded, and escape in darkness. Commodore Arleigh Burke had studied these defeats and developed new destroyer tactics. Burke commanded Destroyer Squadron 23, known as the Little Beavers. He emphasized aggressive use of radar for offensive operations. Use radar to detect the enemy first close to torpedo range without being seen. Launch torpedoes silently. Use radar to guide the attack. Only open gunfire after torpedoes were running. Burke's ideas challenged standard doctrine. Many senior officers resisted. They did not trust radar enough to base attacks on electronic contacts alone. But Burke's record was undeniable. His destroyer squadron achieved multiple successes using radar-guided tactics. Rear Admiral Theodore Wilkinson, commanding amphibious forces in the South Pacific, recognized that Burke's approach worked. When intelligence indicated another Tokyo Express run to VA on August 6, Wilkinson assigned the intercept mission to a pure destroyer force, no cruisers Musburger would command. Musburger had served under Burke and understood the new tactics. More importantly, Wilkinson gave Musburger freedom to disregard standard tactical advice. Rear Admiral Wilkinson's staff recommended that Musburger avoid torpedo attacks and rely on long-range gunfire. Musburger stated his confidence in the destroyer's ability to utilize their primary weapon, torpedoes, radar-guided torpedoes. On the morning of August 6th, Musburger's task group departed Purvis Bay near Guadalcanal. The 6 destroyers sailed independently. No cruisers, no battleships, just destroyers with radar and torpedoes. Musburger convened a conference with all 6 destroyer captains before departure. He reviewed the battle plan in detail. Division A1 would locate the enemy with radar and launch a silent torpedo attack. Division A2 would position to cross the Japanese T and provide gunfire support after the torpedoes hit. Radio silence except for essential tactical reports. No searchlights, no gun flashes until the torpedoes were running. Use the islands as background to screen American movements. Trust the radar. Lieutenant Commander Clifton Iverson commanded Dunlap. Lieutenant Commander Frank Gould commanded Sterrett. Both would later receive Navy crosses for their actions that night. But the planning conference emphasized that success depended on perfect radar operation and precise execution. Every ship needed to track the same targets. Every ship needed to calculate identical firing solutions. The combat information centers aboard each destroyer would coordinate the attack. The CIC was a relatively new concept, a dedicated space where radar operators, plotters, and communicators worked together to process tactical information. Most destroyers in 1943 had CICs that were cramped afterthoughts, spaces carved out of existing compartments during refits, but they worked. That evening, the task group entered Vela Gulf from the TRE Scribes Pate South. The night was dark, overcast skies, no moon, visibility less than 1,000 yards. Perfect conditions for radar, terrible conditions for visual lookouts. Moose's force formed into 2 columns 500 yards apart. Division A1 to port, Division A2 to starboard. At 2,300 hours, both divisions turned north and increased to 25 knots. The SG radars on all 6 ships swept continuously. Columbanga Island showed clearly on the scopes to the east. Vela Island to the west. The gulf between them was empty. At 2333, Dunlap's SG radar detected 4 contacts bearing 312 degrees. Range 29,500 yards, almost due north. Craven confirmed the contact seconds later. Then Mori, the Japanese destroyers were exactly where intelligence predicted, for ships in column formation heading south at approximately 30 knots. Closing range. Musburger ordered Division A1 to prepare for torpedo attack. Division A2 began maneuvering to cross the Japanese T. All ships maintained radio silence. The CICs tracked the targets continuously. Range decreasing. 27,000 yards, 25,000, 20,000. The Japanese showed no indication they knew American ships were present. Their radar, if they had any, was not detecting Moose Brothers destroyers. The mountainous bulk of Savo Island might be screening the American formation or Japanese radar was simply not as capable as American SG systems. At 15,000 yards, Musger ordered his division to close to torpedo range. The 3 destroyers increased to 30 knots. The target solution updated continuously. Enemy speed 30 knots. Course 180 degrees, range decreasing 10,000 yards, 9,000, 8,000 at 2341 range was 7,500 yards. Musiger ordered torpedo launch. Dunlap fired 8 Mark 15 torpedoes. Craven fired 8. Maury fired 8. 24 torpedoes in the water in 63 seconds. All 3 destroyers turned hard to starboard immediately and increased to flank speed. Using Savo Island's dark coastline as a screen, they withdrew at maximum speed. The torpedoes ran toward the Japanese formation at 46 knots. Time to impact, approximately 4 minutes. Division A2 had positioned to starboard of the Japanese formation. Lang, Sterrett, and Stack held fire, waiting. The torpedo tracks were invisible to everyone except the CIC plotters who calculated impact times based on launch data. At 23:46, the torpedoes hit. Multiple explosions. Hajikatsu, Arisher, and Kawakaze were struck simultaneously. Fire erupted across all 3 destroyers. Secondary explosions as magazines detonated. Division A2 opened fire immediately. 5-inch guns from 3 destroyers concentrated on the burning Japanese ships. The muzzle flashes lit the Gulf. Now the Gulf Palm Japanese could see their attackers, but it was too late. Kawakaze had been hit in a magazine. She rolled over and sank within minutes. Hajikatsu and Arisher were burning fiercely, dead in the water. Shiger, the 4th Japanese destroyer, had not been hit. Commander Har saw his 3 companions explode. He saw no American ships until Division A2 opened fire. The gun flashes revealed American positions, but Har's lookouts had seen nothing before that moment. Hara fired 8 torpedoes toward the American destroyers. All missed. He ordered full speed and withdrew to the northwest. Muz Brothers' 6 destroyers reformed and swept the area. By midnight, Hajikatsu and Arisher had both sunk. Shiger was gone, fleeing north. The engagement from first radar contact to final sinkings had lasted 26 minutes. American casualties. 1 sailor suffered a crushed hand in a non-combat accident during the battle. No American ships were hit. No American ships were damaged. 3 Japanese destroyers sunk. 685 Japanese soldiers lost, most by drowning. 525 Japanese sailors dead. Total Japanese casualties approximately 1,210. The lopsided victory was unprecedented. American destroyers had never achieved such complete success in a night engagement. Musger's after-action report emphasized the role of SG radar. Quote, "The new SG radar made the success of this operation possible." He noted that radar allowed the American force to track the enemy from extreme range, positioned for optimal attack, and launch torpedoes before the Japanese knew they were present. The report also praised the combat information centers aboard each destroyer for processing radar data and coordinating the attack. But what Musger could not fully explain was why the Japanese had not detected his ships. Surely Japanese radar should have provided some warning. What nobody on the American side knew was that none of the 4 Japanese destroyers at Vela Gulf carried operational radar. Japanese destroyer radar in 1943 was primitive. Most Japanese destroyers did not yet have radar installations. Those that did carried Type 22 surface search sets which operated at 10 centimeters like American SG radar but with far less capable displays and processing. More critically, Japanese doctrine did not emphasize radar use. Even when radar detected contacts, Japanese commanders waited for visual confirmation before acting. Japanese training emphasized superior night optics. Their lookouts were genuinely better than American lookouts at visual detection. But lookouts cannot see through darkness at 30,000 yards. Radar could. Commander Har filed his after-action report upon returning to Rabble. He described the engagement as an ambush by unknown forces. Har reported that his destroyers came under torpedo attack with no warning. His lookout saw nothing until American ships opened gunfire. Har speculated that submarines might have been involved, or aircraft, or possibly coastal defense installations on Kolombangara. The possibility that 6 American destroyers had used radar to track his force from beyond visual range, calculate a perfect firing solution, and launch torpedoes silently did not appear in his report. The concept was outside the framework of how Japanese commanders understood night surface combat. Japanese naval intelligence analyzed reports from Vela Gulf and other recent engagements. Pattern was emerging. American forces were achieving surprise more frequently. American torpedo attacks were more accurate. Japanese lookouts reported that American ships seemed to know Japanese positions before visual contact. The logical conclusion was that American radar had improved dramatically. But Japanese intelligence had examined captured American radar equipment. They knew Americans had microwave radar similar to Japanese systems. If both sides had comparable technology, why were Americans suddenly winning? What Japanese intelligence failed to understand was doctrine. Technology alone did not determine outcomes. How the technology was used mattered more. Japanese commanders used radar as a supplement to visual lookouts. Americans were learning to use radar as the primary detection and targeting system. Visual confirmation was secondary. This doctrinal shift, more than any technical advantage, explained American success. Within days of Vela Gulf, Musburger's tactics spread through the Pacific Fleet. Rear Admiral Wilkinson distributed the action report to every destroyer squadron commander. The message was clear. SG radar worked. Radar-guided torpedo attacks worked. Independent destroyer operations worked. Other commanders began implementing similar tactics. On August 17, 1943, destroyers using radar-guided attacks sank 2 more Japanese destroyers near Bougainville. On September 6, another engagement resulted in 3 Japanese destroyers sunk for 0 American losses. The pattern continued. American destroyers with SG radar were winning night battles decisively. The kill ratio reversed completely. Before Vela Gulf, American forces typically lost 2 ships for every Japanese ship destroyed in night actions. After Vela Gulf, Americans were destroying 2 or 3 Japanese ships for every American loss. In many engagements, American forces took no losses at all. Japanese Naval Command recognized the shift. By late September 1943, Japanese doctrine changed. Destroyers were ordered to avoid night engagements with American forces unless they held significant numerical superiority. The Tokyo Express supply runs to Guadalcanal and the Central Solomons became increasingly rare. When they did occur, Japanese forces used submarines and small craft instead of destroyers. The American destroyer force, once considered inferior to Japanese night fighting capability, had become the dominant force in nocturnal surface combat. But radar technology remained classified throughout the war. The Navy's Public Information Office never explained how American destroyers achieved their victories. Official press releases attributed success to superior tactics, improved training, and better torpedoes. All of those factors were true. American torpedoes had been terrible in 1942. Magnetic exploders failed. Depth settings were wrong. Many torpedoes ran beneath targets without exploding. By July 1943, most of these problems were fixed. American destroyers also had better training. By mid-1943, officers like Burke and Moose understood night surface tactics better than their predecessors. But none of these improvements would have mattered without radar. SG radar provided the information necessary to execute the tactics. Radar operators in the combat information centers processed that information and provided targeting data to the bridge. The technology enabled everything else. Yet the radar operators remained anonymous. No names in action reports, no commendations for individual radar men. The technology was classified. Discussing SG radar capabilities outside of cleared personnel was prohibited. Even after the war, when radar became common knowledge, the specific contributions of individual operators were not documented. Official histories credited commanders. Musger received the Navy Cross for Vela Gulf. Iverson and Gould received Navy Crosses. The captains and admirals got recognition. The enlisted men who operated the radar equipment that made the victory possible got nothing. Musger himself recognized this imbalance. After the war, when he became a rear admiral and later a vice admiral, he made a point of telling junior officers about the importance of enlisted technical specialists. He told them that mechanics, radarmen, and technicians often understood their equipment better than officers did. He emphasized that good commanders listened to their enlisted experts. Musger specifically mentioned Gulf in these talks. He said the victory was possible because radar operators did their jobs perfectly under intense pressure. He said combat information center crews processed information faster than anyone had thought possible. He said torpedo crews executed flawless launches based on radar data they had never used operationally before. But he could not name individuals. The men who actually operated the equipment, who maintained it, who made it work when it mattered most, remained anonymous. Musger continued in destroyer command through 1944. He led Destroyer Division 12 through the Philippines campaign. His destroyers participated in the Battle of Vela Gulf in October 1944, the largest naval battle in history. American forces at Lee used the same radar-guided tactics Musburger had pioneered at Vela Gulf. The results were devastating for the Japanese. American destroyers sank multiple Japanese cruisers and destroyers in night actions. The Imperial Japanese Navy lost effective control of the Philippines. By early 1945, Japanese surface forces avoided night engagements entirely. American destroyer forces dominated the night. After the war, Musseger was promoted steadily. Commodore in 1945, captain in command positions through the late 1940s, Rear Admiral in 1951. He commanded Military Sea Transportation Service Pacific from 1952 to 1955, a critical logistics role during the Korean War. He retired as a Vice Admiral in 1956. He died on October 1, 1974 at age 73. USS Musseger, a Spruant-class destroyer, was commissioned in 1978 and named in his honor. Commander Hara survived the war. Shigura, the destroyer he commanded at Vela Gulf, survived until January 1945, when she was sunk by the submarine USS Blackfin in the Gulf of Siam. Hara transferred to other commands and witnessed the steady decline of Japanese naval power. After the war, Hara wrote a memoir titled Japanese Destroyer Captain, published in 1958. In it, he described Gulf as a perfect American victory. He acknowledged that American radar superiority had been decisive. He noted that Japanese forces had no counter to radar-guided attacks. Hara specifically mentioned that Japanese lookouts, despite their superior training, could not compete with electronic detection. He died in 1980. Captain Kaju Sujura, who commanded the Japanese force at Vela Gulf, survived the sinking of Hajikatsi. He was rescued and returned to Rabble emaciated and in disgrace. He was later appointed captain of the heavy cruiser Haguro. He was killed when Haguro was sunk by British destroyers off Malaya in May 1945. The Royal Navy destroyers used radar to track Haguro in darkness and launch torpedoes from beyond visual range. The same tactics that destroyed Sugura's destroyers at Vela Gulf destroyed his cruiser 22 months later. The SG radar remained in service aboard American destroyers through the end of the war. Approximately 1,000 SG units were produced during the war years. The system proved reliable under combat conditions. Operators learned to trust the displays. Commanders learned to base tactical decisions on radar information. By 1945, American naval doctrine had completely incorporated radar as the primary detection and targeting system for surface combat. Visual lookouts remained important, but they were secondary to electronic detection. After the war, radar technology advanced rapidly. The SG radar became obsolete by the 1950s. Newer systems with better resolution, longer range, and more sophisticated displays replaced it. The SG systems were removed from ships and either scrapped or sent to training facilities. Few examples survived. The National Museum of the United States Navy has some SG components in storage, but no complete system is on public display. The combat information centers where radar operators worked were torn out during ship modernizations or destroyed when ships were scrapped. USS Dunlap, Moose's flagship at Vela Gulf, survived the war. She participated in operations through 1945, including Uema and Okinawa. She was decommissioned in January 1946. She was sold for scrap in 1947. Her SG radar was removed during decommissioning. No museum requested it. The equipment was either destroyed or sent to a training facility where it was eventually discarded. Nothing physical remains from the destroyer that made first radar contact at Vela Gulf. At the Naval History and Heritage Command in Washington, there is a small exhibit about the Battle of Vela Gulf. It includes a photograph showing 6 destroyers in column formation. The caption identifies them as Musburger's task group. It mentions the battle as the first successful independent destroyer action in the Pacific Campaign. It notes that the engagement marked a turning point in night surface warfare. It does not mention SG radar. It does not mention the combat information centers. It does not mention the radar operators who detected the Japanese force at 29,500 yards and tracked them to torpedo range. Their contribution remains invisible. This is how technological change occurs in warfare. Not through deliberate programs or high-level decisions alone, but through the intersection of new tools, new doctrine, and individuals willing to trust unfamiliar technology. The SG radar existed in 1942. It took until August 1943 for commanders to trust it enough to base attacks on radar contacts alone. That trust came from officers like Seeger, who understood that the old doctrine was killing American sailors. It came from radar operators who maintained their equipment perfectly and provided accurate information under combat stress. It came from enlisted men whose names were never recorded but whose work changed the course of the Pacific War. The Battle of Vela Gulf demonstrated that radar-guided night attacks could achieve decisive results with minimal American casualties. That lesson spread rapidly. Within months, every American destroyer commander in the Pacific understood the new tactics. Within a year, Japanese surface forces had effectively ceded control of the night to American radar-equipped ships. The technological advantage that Japanese forces had held since 1941 disappeared. The innovation did not come from a laboratory or a planning conference. It came from putting the right technology in the hands of skilled operators and trusting them to use it. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered, and we would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania. From veterans to history enthusiasts, you are part of something special here. Thank you for watching and thank you for keeping these stories alive.